what would you say were like the biggest challenges or challenge? I can clearly tell that you're a top tier designer. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And we will be walking through probably one of the most important parts that a UX designer or a product designer needs to have when they apply for a job. And that is a portfolio. Specifically, be going into one of the projects that she's worked on in her portfolio.
Kicking this off, hello. Thanks for the opportunity to interview. I am a Nigerian American designer and a doctoral researcher. I currently work as a senior designer building very delightful experiences on Microsoft Teams, and I have an industrial design educational foundation. Today, I'll be sharing a project that highlights a different part of my experience as a Microsoft designer. Specifically, it's a hackathon-led effort that I started to add functionality to Microsoft Teams. This project was really just covering a unique kind of issue that myself and a few other colleagues had come across, and we wanted to solve for that during the hackathon. So the core problem really was name pronunciation. Being Nigerian, this is my mom's name, and it was quite often you would hear people trying to pronounce her name and they'd butcher it. And even while at work, going in meetings and meeting new people, a lot of other people that I worked with also brought up this idea of this issue, this problem of name pronunciation, and how that kind of got in the way at work. So I kicked off a hackathon group, a hackathon team to tackle name pronunciation in Teams. And we decided to look at Teams specifically because it was the platform at work through which we would collaborate and our teams would interact. So it seemed like the perfect place to come up with a design solution for making it easier to interact with your colleagues at work and feel confident pronouncing names that you may not be familiar with. So I built a team, pulled in some friends of mine, but also wanted to make sure that I was building a very interdisciplinary team. So we wanted it to be, even if it was just a hackathon project, we wanted it to be research led and to, at the end of it, have some kind of working demo to then share out to the rest of the company. So working together, we kind of put together a quick study where we surveyed a bunch of coworkers to validate the why this problem. So how often do you find yourself unable to pronounce a coworker's name? How often do you have your name mispronounced by coworkers? And we got really interesting results and found that at least good percentage of people that we surveyed have encountered this issue in their day-to-day. And then we also wanted to validate the what. So how did people feel about the concept of having a name pronunciation feature in Teams? And we also got a good signal from a majority of people saying, yeah, that would be interesting, depending on what it looked like and how it works, of course. And then we were also thinking about ways to make this very delightful. So we thought about ways to expand on not just showing or teaching people how to pronounce different names, but also having it be an opportunity to actually connect a bit more with your coworkers by having a way to say, okay, this is what my name means, or this is where it's from, to kind of continue to build that kind of connection. And this was also during the global pandemic. So I think trying to find ways to have stronger connection virtually was also top of mind, which is why we thought of this concept where you're able to also add the story of your name to your name pronunciation. We also saw a lot of great responses from people we surveyed interested in this concept. So we also looked at how receptive people would be to name pronunciation within Teams, and it was also extremely likely. After that, and growing our team to include more designers and now a PM, we wanted to then kind of hone in on the jobs that a user would go through when using the the name pronouncer in Teams. So, given that the hackathon was a short period of time, a couple weeks, we actually decided to start early so that we could spend this time kind of looking at research, not being rushed. The hackathon is, sorry, 3 days. So we started about a month early to start to survey people and put together these user stories based on the responses to our research survey. And then we narrowed it down and scoped it to just these jobs to be done. So based on based on these priorities, we focused on creating concepts for users to be able to see, read, and listen to the name pronunciation of a coworker, and then to be able to record or even choose generated phonetics of their names, and then also learn about the origin of their coworker's name, and potentially even find people who speak the same language. But those were all nice to haves, and we just focused on solving the core problem for the duration of the hackathon. So again, continuing to add more members to the team, we then worked on creating personas. So this person is Nigerian, and they've had issues during while like working with colleagues where people either mispronounce their name or people struggle to pronounce their name, and it makes them feel disconnected. And so we kind of honed in on that, and then also created another persona for someone who also wants to be able to go into interactions with their coworkers with confidence to pronounce their name correctly. Then we worked on a quick flow, given like the existing team's product, and thought about ways and locations within the interface that this would intuitively show up. And the one we kind of focused on was looking at the people card, so how people are represented within the Teams app. So in like when you hover or you click on someone's avatar or picture, then you get a card kind of giving you information about that person. We felt this would be the best surface and the most intuitive surface for people to want to know more about a person, and then consequently want to be able to learn how to pronounce their name. So breaking it down into two flows, one consuming the pronunciation of someone's name and then adding the pronunciation, we kind of walked through what that would look like for a user. And then we also thought about, given the different components that we had available in Teams, we thought about what this could grow into. Because yes, we were just creating a concept during a hackathon project, but our goal was to also present this to the Teams team to then see how it could potentially become a real thing. So the outcome was a working demo and a prototype of the people card with an existing name pronunciation functionality to it. And this was as a result of great collaboration from even more members of the hack team, from designers that actually worked on the people card team at Microsoft to a team of engineers to actually help us build a working prototype, and a content designer to make sure that we were communicating clearly to users. So I'll just walk through the designs and a quick prototype just to show what we came up with. So if looking at this from the perspective of Nkechi, one of the personas who has always had her name mispronounced, if she goes to her profile setup space here, she can then set a name pronunciation for herself. And then we made sure to include options where the user could record their own pronunciation, but potentially even have a way to have a generated pronunciation for them, and allow them to quickly check and confirm, and select one that they wanted. Or you could actually also just record your own pronunciation. So then quickly they'd be able to do this in place, and review the recording, edit if they need to. Then the second thing we wanted to include was a phonetic pronunciation of your name. So being able to be a bit inclusive in that we're not just providing a recording, but also text. So Nkechi then writes out how her name sounds and saves it. And then if we then switch to the other persona, Susan, she can see, oh, Nkechi's asking to hop on a quick call. I've never worked with her before. I've never interacted with her over a call. How do I say this name? She can hover over the card and get a quick listen before she hops into her meeting. So the engineers were able to build a working demo of this at the time in 2020. So looking at like the further idea, the further concept that we were also exploring post the hackathon, that kind of emphasized a greater connection more than just learning how to pronounce someone's name. Nkechi can go in the same interface and add a story of her name. And actually, when people look at her card, they can then get just a little bit of a personal connection with their coworker. So again, this was a nice to have, but we felt this was based on the signal we got from the preliminary research we did. This would be fun to include. So overall, we ended up winning a small award during the hackathon for diversity, a project that was focused on diversity and inclusion. And when I look back at this quick design project, there are a few things, UX wise, that we could definitely have improved on. So, for example, potentially being able to have a more focused state when you're recording by temporarily disabling options could help communicate to the user that they're in that mode. And then also, in thinking about how people actually discover this name pronunciation feature, instead of putting the burden of discoverability on the user, there's also the potential to put it off the user by having very intelligent cues. So if you do have a meeting with someone and they've just added a name pronunciation to their profile, maybe Teams is able to prompt you to say, by the way, this person has shared a name pronunciation. Do you want to listen to it? So this little things like that could definitely help improve the user experience. So overall, I mean, for me, it was very impactful to run this quick sprint, but to make the decision to start early so that I could build a team over time that stretched across disciplines, people that were invested in the issue and in the solution, be very data driven, actually have a road to potential implementation by having engineers actually build out a demo. And then personally to just practice being in a leadership role and leading a team over a short period of time was very, very beneficial. And just seeing the impact that it had on one of our teammates was really great. Being able to, kind of share almost a very microcosm of the entire design process, working with people from different disciplines to get to a solution.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you honestly answered a lot of the questions that I was going to ask because you went through, like, oh, what would I have improved on? What would I have changed and whatnot? What would you say were like the biggest challenges or challenge, while you were going through the design phase?
I would say the biggest challenge going through the design phase was probably scoping, making sure that we weren't trying to solve for too many problems.
Mm-hmm.
And another would be because at that point, I currently work on Teams now, but at that point, I wasn't on the Teams team. I was just a user of
Mm-hmm.
the app. So I think also understanding what the current patterns were and making sure that we're designing something, because feasibility was a goal for the team. We wanted to be able to share this out at the end of the hackathon with the team's team and say, hey, we've done some early exploration for you guys to then go off and think some more about. But I think that would probably be the two main issues is making sure that we were focused on the problem we had to solve and not trying to spiral and do too many things at once, especially because
Yeah.
it was a hackathon project, but also understanding the right
Mhm.
pattern to be using, yeah, when designing for like plugging into an existing app. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take the interviewer hat off now,
Okay.
and we can now go to the portion where we debrief. And also, I know you've done a lot of talking. I'll talk a little bit on my thoughts and whatnot. I think that you did a really really good job throughout your presentation. I mean, I can clearly tell that you're a top tier designer because you focused on a lot of small little details as you were going through that presentation, right? Like as you got deeper and deeper into the process of designing this feature for the hackathon, like you added more and more coworkers
Mhm.
in the top right hand corner, right? So I mean, it's just those little things that that can really stand out, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and staying consistent, of course, with like the design language and stuff. I noticed, and I don't know if this was intentional or not. Maybe I misread, but like I could tell too that like the design colors and stuff were in line with Microsoft Teams with that like kind of like the shades of purple and
Yeah.
whatnot. So I think in that sense, like
Yeah.
paying attention to those very small details can
Definitely.
really go a long way. I also really liked how you put a lot of like empathy and value into the feature itself. I think when you're trying to like tell a story or really sell something, having that like element of value and
Yeah.
empathy can go a long way. And this is not just a concept that's limited to design. In
Right.
any field that you're going to go into, like I'm in sales, right? As a solutions architect, but we still have to use a lot of those elements of value and empathy. When we try to sell, right?
Mhm.
So that just shows that design thinking isn't just limited to UX design. It's something that
Absolutely not. Yeah.
you utilize in almost every single field. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
But Zoe, I'll hand it to you. What do you think? How do you think it went? And then what are some tips that you would give to someone who they're going into their first UX interview ever, whether that's for an internship or full time job? Like
Mhm.
what tips do you have for them to when they're going through portfolio review or going
Yeah.
over a project in their portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, I'll start off by critiquing myself a bit because I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist. I feel like I could have maybe introduced the project a bit better, and also maybe spend a bit more time on iteration. So I really just showed,
Hmm.
I talked through the thinking and like the process of creating personas and mapping out the flows. But I didn't really spend enough time showing,
Hmm.
maybe one or two iterations and ways that we pivoted from some of the designs that we started off doing early. I just went to kind of the final prototype. So that's probably one thing I would say that it's really important, at least in the interviews that I've done and on being on the other end of it as well, being an interviewer. It really shows a lot
Hmm.
of self awareness and growth when you're able to not just show the kind of the polished side of your project, but even if it's just one beat or one slide, to be able to say, so I had this assumption, or maybe I interpreted the data this way, and I came up with this design. But then when it was tested, it didn't do so well, so I had to pivot. Or when I went through a bunch of edge
Hmm.
cases, I realized, wait, this doesn't work in this scenario. And so then I had to pivot. And then showing what you ended up with. I think it really shows a more like holistic approach to trying to solve a problem as a designer. So that's one thing I would say is
Hmm.
probably missing from that presentation. I think also you kind of touched on this earlier when you noticed the team counter in the top right, and even like how I started off with my mom's name. I think storytelling is very important in presenting a
Yeah.
project. It really helps to showcase your uniqueness and how you want to present a project. It's kind of the slide design and the way that you tell your story is your way to put a bit of your flair in there, your creative flair, and it really does stand out. If you think about it, so many hiring managers and even recruiters are going through so many portfolios, interviewing so many people, and are seeing template after template after template. So being able to just one, like show your creative flair in some way and how you present your work, but then also thinking about how you're introducing the problem, the process, and then the solution, or the pivot and then the solution, in a very interesting and captivating way, I think is very important. And then lastly, I would say, remember, this is something that a mentor of mine told me as well, but remember that it's, in a way, it's also a dual interview. Like you're there to add value to a company,
Hmm.
so it's important to go into a portfolio presentation, or just an interview, UX interview overall, with questions, um, understanding who the team is that you're interviewing for, what the company is, what their goals are. Maybe if you're interviewing for a specific product, like how has that product grown over the last year? What are they doing? And it helps to come with those kinds of questions to see if you would be if they would be a good place for you to be in. And it also shows like investment in the team even before you're hired, in a way. And in that vein as well, like picking the projects that you're presenting kind of ties to that. So you want to pick projects that are in line with what the values that they're looking for.
Thank you so much. That was very, very valuable. The insights going through the portfolio, your
Awesome.
analysis and self critiquing, and whatnot. So thank you so much
Thanks so much.
for everyone that's watching. Everyone watching at home, thank you for tuning in. If you guys want to see more content like this, please make sure to like, comment, share the video with anyone who you think would find this to be valuable, and most importantly, subscribe so that you can stay up to date with all the videos on the Exponent YouTube channel. Awesome. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.